The Thompson family had a reputation to keep. They were rich, well-connected, and always made sure to appear classy. Frances Thompson, the family matriarch, took this very seriously. So when her only son, Brian, fell in love with me, a regular kindergarten teacher from a small town, she made it clear she wasn't happy. "She seems nice," Frances had said after we first met. But the way she said nice made it sound like an insult. "But honestly, Brian, what could you possibly have in common with someone so simple?" Brian stood up for me, of course. He loved that I was down to earth and real, qualities that were rare in the wealthy world he grew up in. But Frances never stopped trying to make me feel like I didn't belong. When Brian proposed with his grandmother's ring, she made her feelings even clearer. "Congratulations," she said coldly over the phone when Brian told her the news. "I suppose we'll need to start planning immediately. There's so much Isabella will need to learn about how things are done in our world." Our world, as if I came from another planet, not just a town 50 miles away. Planning the wedding became a battle. Frances controlled everything, the venue, the food, the flowers, using every decision to remind me I didn't measure up to her standards. I kept telling myself this was about marrying Brian, not impressing his mother. Then came wedding dress shopping. Frances insisted we go to an exclusive bridal shop in the city, where generations of Thompson women had bought their gowns. She also invited several of her wealthy friends to join us, women who appeared in fancy magazines and charity event photos. "It's tradition," she said when I suggested a smaller group. "These women have known Brian since he was a child. Their opinion matters." What she really meant was that my opinion didn't. The shop was as intimidating as I expected. Fancy chandeliers, champagne, and wedding dresses displayed like works of art. The owner greeted Frances with air kisses and polite chit-chat. "And this must be the bride," she said, looking me over with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Yes, this is Isabella," Frances replied. "We'll need something that flatters her shape, maybe with sleeves, and nothing too trendy, something classic to elevate her natural simplicity." I bit my tongue as they took my measurements, talking about my body as if I weren't even there. Frances's friends sipped champagne, reminiscing about their own weddings, each one supposedly more glamorous than the last. I tried on 7 dresses. Each time, Frances and her friends exchanged glances, whispered, or made small frowns. I felt exhausted and close to tears. "Perhaps we should continue another day," the shop owner suggested kindly. "Finding the right dress takes time." Just then, my phone rang. It was my mom. "Isabella, honey, I know you're busy with the Thompsons today, but I wanted to let you know that package we talked about arrived. It's even more beautiful than we hoped." Relief flooded through me. "That's wonderful, Mom. I'll stop by later to see it." When I hung up, I noticed Frances watching me closely, suspicion in her eyes. "A package, something for the wedding?" Frances asked, her voice sharp with curiosity. "Just something my mother wanted me to see," I replied vaguely. "Speaking of which, I should probably wrap up here. Thank you for your time and advice." Frances looked offended. "But we haven't found a suitable dress yet, Isabella. This isn't like picking out a dress from a department store. A wedding gown takes time and careful selection." "I understand," I said, using my best kindergarten teacher patience. "And I appreciate everyone's help, but I need some time to think about my choices." 2 weeks later, Frances called an urgent meeting at her house. When Brian and I arrived, we found her in the sunroom, surrounded by wedding magazines and table decorations. "Isabella," she said without wasting time, "I've heard troubling news. Apparently, you bought a wedding dress without proper consultation from some small-town boutique." I took a deep breath. "I did find my dress, yes." Frances' hand flew to her throat in shock. "But we didn't approve anything. The bridal salon was preparing a new selection for our next appointment." "I appreciate that," I said calmly. "But I already found something I love." Frances forced a smile. "Well, I'm sure it's nice. Perhaps we can have it altered to make it more suitable." "Where did you find this dress?" "My mother found it, actually." Frances exchanged a knowing look with her friend Beatrice, who had apparently been called in for backup. "I see. Well, that explains a lot," Frances said. "I'm sure your mother meant well, but she wouldn't understand the level of quality expected at a Thompson wedding." Brian, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. "Mom, Isabella's dress is beautiful, and ultimately, it's her choice." "Of course," Frances replied, still smiling tightly. I just don't want her to feel out of place standing next to proper society brides. People notice these things. Maybe, Beatrice suggested, pretending to be helpful, we could see the dress, just to see what alterations might be needed. I hesitated, then nodded. Actually, I brought it with me today. I thought you might want to see it. Frances' eyebrows shot up. You brought it? Here. Today. It's in the car. I'll go get it. When I returned with the garment bag, Frances had composed herself, clearly ready to act polite about whatever dress she assumed was a disaster. Brian squeezed my hand as I unzipped the bag. The dress that emerged was stunning. An ivory silk gown with delicate beadwork along the neckline and a soft, elegant train. Even on the hanger, it was clearly something special. Frances' eyes narrowed. What a shame your family couldn't afford something better, she said, looking at it with fake disappointment. Everyone will know you don't belong in our circle. I stayed quiet as she kept going. It looks like a cheap copy, she said, reaching for the collar. The beadwork is messy, and this silk isn't even real. Then she turned over the label. Her face went pale. This is impossible, she whispered. This can't be real. How could you possibly? It's real, I said softly. A gift from my godmother. Beatrice scoffed. Your godmother? And who exactly is she? Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. Brian went to get it and returned moments later with my mother, standing beside a woman Frances clearly recognized instantly. Elena, Frances gasped, standing up. Elena Rissy, what are you doing here? The woman, elegant silver-haired, dressed in simple but flawless linen, smiled. Maggie Thompson, it's been, 30 years? Still terrifying young brides, I see. Some things never change. My mother stepped forward and gently squeezed my shoulders. I believe you've been getting to know my daughter, though maybe not as well as you thought. Frances looked between them, confused. I don't understand. How do you know Elena Rissy? Elena, the Elena Rissy, world-famous designer, laughed lightly. Catherine and I were college roommates. Model? Frances repeated weakly, staring at my mother, the small-town kindergarten teacher she had assumed was ordinary. Just for a few years, my mother said modestly, before I met Isabella's father and decided to move back home. But Elena and I stayed close. She's Isabella's godmother, and when she heard about the wedding, I insisted on designing her dress myself, Elena finished. Catherine was like a sister to me when we were starting out. Her daughter is family. Frances sank into her chair, speechless. Beatrice, meanwhile, was staring at my mother in amazement. You're Catherine Jensen, the face of Reese's Breakthrough '89 collection. I still have those magazine spreads. You vanished from fashion so suddenly. My mother smiled. I found something I loved more, being a teacher, raising my family. That life made me happier than the fashion world ever did. Brian slipped an arm around my waist as we watched his mother try to process everything. So you see, Frances, I said gently, I do appreciate your help with the wedding. But I also have my own resources. And more importantly, I know exactly who I am, even if you misunderstood at first. A heavy silence followed until Elena clapped her hands. Shall we talk about the rest of the wedding? I brought some design ideas for the mother of the groom, something that will look perfect next to Isabella's dress. Maggie, if you're interested. 2 days later, Brian and I were having dinner at my parents' cozy home. He looked at the framed photos on the walls, magazine covers from my mother's modeling days next to childhood pictures of school plays and soccer games. I've never seen these before, he said, helping my dad grill vegetables in the backyard. Your mom was a big deal. No wonder my mother's acting so differently now. My dad laughed. Catherine has always been impressive. She just never made a big deal about it. Still is, I called from the patio, setting the table with my mom. She smiled. The funny thing is, Frances and I probably would have had things in common if she just asked instead of assuming. We both walked away from high-profile worlds to focus on family. We both value education and community, but she was so busy deciding where I fit that she never really saw me. After what Brian jokingly called the dress revelation, wedding planning changed. Frances didn't become warm, but she was more respectful. She asked instead of demanded and even accepted my mother's help, especially after realizing my mom's old connections included more than just Elena Rissy. On my wedding day, as my mother helped me into the beautiful dress that had caused all the drama, I thought about how this experience had unexpectedly given me something special. It had connected me to my past and made me even more sure of who I was. You know, my mother said, adjusting my veil, I wore the most expensive gowns in the world. But I never felt as beautiful as I know you will today. Because today, you're marrying for love, not for appearances. As I walked down the aisle toward Brian, I caught Frances's gaze in the front row. But for once, she wasn't focused on appearances or status. Instead, she had tears in her eyes as she watched her son's face light up. At the reception, Elena gave a toast that summed it all up. To Brian and Isabella, and to the two families joining today, may you all discover, as I have, that true elegance doesn't come from labels or status, but from kindness, authenticity, and looking beyond first impressions. Frances, surprisingly, clinked glasses with my mother at those words. Later, as Brian and I danced under the stars, he whispered, "You know what my favorite thing about your dress is?" "What?" I asked, expecting him to mention the beadwork or the fit. That underneath all that designer magic, it's being worn by the same down-to-earth kindergarten teacher I fell in love with, the one who knows exactly who she is, with or without a fancy label. I kissed him, grateful to have someone who had seen me clearly from the very start, something his mother was only now learning to do. 6 months after the wedding, Frances invited my mother and me over for tea. This time, she skipped the fancy drawing room and led us to a sunny patio instead. She seemed different, less formal, almost nervous. "I've been thinking a lot," she admitted, "about first impressions, about how we show ourselves to the world, and what we choose to hide." My mother and I exchanged surprised looks as she went on. "Catherine, when we first met, I assumed things about you based only on what I saw. I never imagined your past, and I judge Isabella the same way." She hesitated, then took a deep breath. "The truth is, before I married into the Thompson family, my background was more like yours than anyone knows. My father owned a hardware store. I worked as a sales clerk to put myself through college." We both stared at her. Frances Thompson, who always acted like she had come from old money, had actually worked her way into high society. When I met Philip, I wanted to fit into his world. I studied how the right people dressed, spoke, and entertained. I erased my past so completely that even I started to believe I had always belonged. She looked at me. "When Brian brought you home, Isabella, I wasn't seeing the wonderful person who made my son happy. I was seeing my old self, the part of me I had spent years trying to forget. I was afraid he'd expose the truth I still struggle with." My mother spoke gently. "We all change over time. There's nothing wrong with that." Frances shook her head. The mistake wasn't changing. It was looking down on others for not fitting into the world I forced myself into. She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine, something she had never done before. "I hope I can be a better mother-in-law moving forward, and maybe, in time, even a friend." On the way home, my mother and I tried to make sense of what had just happened. "Do you think she really meant all that?" I asked. "Yes," my mother said. "Sometimes people don't see themselves clearly until they see a reflection in someone unexpected. Like a kindergarten teacher wearing an Alessandra Rissi dress," I joked. My mother laughed. "Exactly, but the dress didn't change who you are. It just helped Frances see past her own judgment. And that was the real gift, not the designer gown or social status, but the reminder that our worth isn't tied to a label, whether it's on a dress or a family name." A year later, when I found out I was pregnant, Frances was one of the first people we told. She hugged me tightly, without any of her usual concern for appearances. "This child," she said with teary eyes, "will have the best of both worlds. Thompson determination, Jensen creativity, and parents who know the value of being true to themselves." As we left that evening, Brian squeezed my hand. "Who would have thought a wedding dress could change so much?" "Not the dress," I said with a smile. "The choice to look beyond it.